Hello everyone and welcome to this special edition of Horizon. I am Tatoyan, the editor of Asbarez. Joining me today in the studio is someone who has become a household name for all of us, not only in Armenia but also the diaspora, since the 44-day war started on September 27th and with its devastating aftermath. His role is to protect the rights of the citizens of Armenia. I'm happy to be joined by Dr. Arman Tatoyan, Armenia's human rights defender, who is also known as the Ombudsman. Dr. Tatoyan, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here in Los Angeles. I have been covering the work that you've been doing on a daily basis. I want to start by talking about some developments over the weekend. If you have been following the coverage of Asbarez, there is a standoff, an escalating standoff on a portion of the highway between Rapan and Goris in the Syunik province. And over the weekend, another section of not the same highway, but another road was announced to have Azeri checkpoints installed there. In a statement that you released today, you called that moment unconstitutional. Can you please elaborate that? Because that is an important statement.
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, Mr. Khachatyan, for your invitation. And it is an honor for me to be here, and I'm very glad to greet all our compatriots. And I want to appreciate cooperation with Asbarez, with Horizon. As you very rightly mentioned, recently we've had in the country developments that are subject for huge concern, and these are sources, additional sources for the violation of the rights of our people, of civilian communities of Armenia. First of all, we have to mention and to realize that Azerbaijani authorities are pursuing targeted policy of isolating Armenian communities, civilian communities, and causing humanitarian issues, human rights violations, etc., under the guise of unblocking roads. All the installations and the checkpoints are apparently illegal. And their actions are very often of criminal nature and even terroristic. Because of their presence on the roads of between communities of Syunik, since the end of the war, the rights, vital rights of our compatriots were violated. First of all, here I refer to right to freedom of movement, right to security, right to life, and other vital rights. By the way, there is a European Court of Human Rights, and this court is an international court. Armenia is a part of this court. This court has issued a jurisprudence according to which its self-presence based on the jurisprudence of this court, it is a very vivid conclusion comes out, according to which its self-presence of Azerbaijani military forces or any armed serviceman is a violation itself, presence, is violation of the right to life. Because here we have to take into account the real motives of the policy of Azerbaijan. This is a genocidal policy, and the policy has not changed. And this is the exact policy which resulted in ethnic cleansing in Nagorno-Karabakh during the war. And now they are carrying out the same policy. So this is their real intent. Their real motives. We have to recognize this. And the human rights approach is very crucial here, because there has been no delimitation and demarcation. Just for your auditorium and for our compatriots to explain that delimitation is a process of identifying roads, the borders of the country, and demarcation is already making certain marks on the ground and identifying the border based on the limitation. Since there has been no delimitation and demarcation, no one can claim that certain parts of the territories are Azerbaijani or even Armenian. But since we have their civilian communities, well, I have to say that all these territories are the historically Armenian lands. This is 100%. But if we go even to the Soviet Union, let's say, maps and borders, it is very evident that we have to take into account rights of our population as primary basis, and we have to derive from this. This should be our starting point, our main priority, because whatever we do now, there is the consequences are there, and they are objective. That people are in a situation of humanitarian even crisis in some residents. There are isolation issues for certain villages, as you mentioned, from Kapan to Chakatan. Just to explain on this very specific example, from the city of Kapan, we have a road, basically the single road to connect 6 villages, because there is a one line of these villages. This is Chakaten, Shikahokh, Sarashen, Tsav, Nerkinhand, Shishkert. And these villages are the only road that connects Kapan city to these villages is the road that some part of it are under the control of Azerbaijan. I'm confident these are illegal. This is illegal control, what is called customs or border control. If Azerbaijanis install their checkpoint, it will result in complete isolation of these communities or the villages from the city of Kapan, and they will have to go through Shuvani, Zor, and Meghri to get to Kapan. So it's more than 160 and more kilometers. So you can see that how the life will be complicated for these people. Even more, there are certain locations near village Nerkinhand, for example, or Tsaf, where Azerbaijani locations are in several hundreds of meters from Armenian secondary schools of these villages, and even in the not far from itself the village Tsav, inside the territory of Armenia. This is basically this region. There is an incursion. We have revealed it very recently that in October last year, during the war, Azerbaijani armed forces invaded the territory of Armenia, and there was an incursion inside the territory up to even 1.3 kilometers, which again poses serious threat to the security of people.
I want to point out, first of all, to clarify that Dr. Tatoyan's position is not a political one.
No.
He is an advocate for the rights of the everyday citizen. And that's why the announcement that you made last week is quite poignant, and it illustrates the situation that the local residents find themselves in. On Thursday, when Azerbaijan on November 11th revealed that it is setting up checkpoints and essentially blocking that road, you said that, for example, a teacher or numerous teachers who were teaching in a specific school near that area were caught off guard. You wake up one day and you realize that, wait a minute, I can't go to work because now that road that I traversed every day is closed. So that is not only impacting the livelihood of the teacher, but it's also impacting the education of the children. And you did also mention that there is a disabled population in the region, which is also being impacted for lack of access to medical and other benefits. How is this new situation going to exacerbate this?
Well, as you very rightly mentioned, my activities are, this is an apolitical institution. We have no relation to politics. I have never been a member to any political party, and I'm not a member of any political party. I have no relation to politics. And all our statements are based on facts, on objective facts. And our purpose is to protect the rights of our people and to direct our government. This is internationally recognized competence of this kind of institutions. In Europe, in other countries of the world, these institutions have their clear mandate in conflict and post-conflict zones. And I have to say that also we are an A status institution. There is a B status, there is a C status. For example, Azerbaijani, my colleague in Azerbaijan, this institution there is a B status institution. It means that they have no access to international many platforms, discussions, channels, etc. But we have this because we are accredited with A status, and this is recognized by the United Nations. So this is international, real international recognition. And that is why our facts are very credible, and we value our word. And we are very careful in evaluating and giving recommendations, so always to keep the credibility and the objectiveness of our work. As you rightly mentioned, on November 11, there was an announcement that Azerbaijan is going to install their checkpoints and to establish border and customs control on the road leading from Goris to Kapan. More specifically, this is the part near Vorotan village. Vorotan, we have there further Shurnukh, etc. And itself, the border and customs control, of course, has no real motives. As I said, the real motive is to isolate our civilian population, and it worked. So once the announcement was made, I immediately sent a group, special group, rapid response group from our village, from our staff to these villages, from our office. So our group had a very, I would say, effective fact-finding mission there and efficient. And within one day, we could visit all these villages. There are basically 3 villages that are under facing these huge problems. This is Shurnukh, Vorotan, and Bartsravan. Bartsravan is the most isolated. I mean, it's the village that faces these isolation issues the most. And as you rightly mentioned, we have there not only problems related to teachers, but rights, because this is right to education, this is right to security, peace. These are the child's best interests guaranteed or safeguarded in the by international commitments of Armenia. Apart from all of this, people are facing problems in terms of receiving first medical aid, etc. This is an absolute humanitarian issue. But because of the roads, so-called alternative roads, because what is the kind of the government policy is that there is an alternative road, we have to use this alternative road. When it comes to alternative roads, I have no objection generally in that the government builds many alternative roads. It is something that the government must do. But we have to have in mind that we are ourselves isolating or contributing to this because of illegal, very often criminal actions of Azerbaijani military. That is why my main point is that we have to take all these facts, humanitarian crisis and whatsoever, and submit them to international relevant communities, relevant organizations, claiming removal of Azerbaijani military forces. And even it does not matter whether these are police, customs, or whatsoever. These are special forces or armed servicemen of a country, the president of which carries out a policy of genocide and ethnic cleansing against Armenians.
And you did also mention in your statement last week that these are the very people who, before the war, were manning the borders and committing a cruel violation of human rights against the Armenians, and now they're essentially in our living room to simplify the matter.
This is such an important question because these servicemen are, in the reality, most of them on the roads, who are on the roads, they are representatives of the State Border Service of Azerbaijan. So not Ministry of Defense or, let's say, military forces, armed forces. But what I say, it does not matter for me as the human rights defender of our country what kind of institution represent these people, because they're, for me, the important thing is that these are armed people with their guns, standing there, having the authority to stop civilians, to intimidate them, and which they did, by the way. Also a bus which was taking children from Artsakh to Armenia and then from Armenia to Artsakh. And we have also to have in mind what is the state policy that their country is undertaking. Their president, who is their chief commander? The chief commander is someone whose main purpose is to have the effects, let's say, as long as possible of their genocidal policy. And more importantly, as you very rightly mentioned, These are those servicemen who committed severe torture and extrajudicial killings, willful killings, and remain unpunished. Moreover, their authorities only are encouraging their illegal actions. We have plenty of evidence certifying, proving that these the activities, criminal activities of this person, killing an Armenian, is something that is subject of, is something that people are proud of this. This is the structure of the policy.
They celebrate it.
They become celebrities. There's a glorification. We have produced several reports based on concrete evidence. There was no subjective, let's say, assessment, evaluation, nothing. Only evidence. And this evidence proof that these people, they are being glorified in Azerbaijan by their society, and they know this. That is why in all videos of torture and photos, we have analyzed more than 300 videos and photos, their cynical behavior, they are with open faces, very well knowing that they will not be punished for this. Moreover, they were filming everything. They were intentionally spreading it through social media, and especially into Armenian social media. That is why I'm saying that our constitution, why I said yesterday that, or this morning, that this is this kind of statements, when we treat security issues only from the angle of kind of the mechanical approaches, maps of Soviet Union of 50s, 60s, 70s, what I say that it does not matter for me. I'm not, since there has been no delimitation and demarcation first. Second, priority for me, the main priority is protection of our compatriots' rights. The fact that you are building, or we are building alternative roads, it does not eliminate threat coming from these soldiers, because they are anyway present there next to the villages, next to our civilian communities. For example, if you go from Goris, whoever had the chance to go from Goris to Kapan through Vorotan, you would see Vorotan community. You would see that specific checkpoint that is now installed on that road is several meters, even several, I don't know, some 20, maybe up to 100 meters away from that, from the civilian houses. This is the distance between Azerbaijani so-called checkpoints and the and civilian houses. This is the problem. We have to take the real motives. And of course, I have also to say that Russian armed border guards, they do play their important role in terms of security of people, ensuring the security, etc. But it does not matter. From the interest of our population, it is a huge problem. Can you imagine on the road that is going through Shurnukh village, we have there are military forces or armed servicemen of 3 countries: Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Russia, and people, children. People live there. They have their livelihood, day-to-day life, and children. I have witnessed myself how children with wooden guns are playing with the soldiers, with Armenians, for example, with Russians. But again, who can? And I'm asking a question to international community organizations: can you convince me that this is in the interests of children's rights? Would you have this situation in your country, and would you accept the situation? No, of course, because it goes across all international standards, whatever was created after the Second World War.
And we're going to touch on the international community's role, but I also want to kind of go back and look at the realities of the post-November 9 statement. And for me, it's unacceptably perplexing. May 12th, Azeris essentially just walk into Armenia and the Gerarkhunik and Syunik provinces, and they set up their camps. And you yourself reported a couple of weeks ago that not only have they set up camp, they're doing active work to fortify those positions, road building, access to, etc. And the government's response has been lax at best, because if someone came into my house and just randomly sat there, I would be more proactive than just letting them take my couch, for example. But at the same time, there are negotiations happening on the so-called opening of the communications and transport links. So while these communications are happening, we're seeing Armenia's national security chief announce that such and such section is no longer part of Armenia. The prime minister all of a sudden announces that, oh yeah, I gave away 13 miles of road back in December, so to avoid some kind of a border skirmish. How does that work from just an international negotiation perspective? If you are within a negotiation, do you just give away stuff because it's expedient?
Well, first, I want to touch upon one very important issue, as you mentioned very rightly. I'm not representing the government. This is an independent institution.
Yes.
We are producing only facts, objective facts, because I was myself in all these regions. We have been conducting fact-finding missions, and we produced specific report with the locations, exact locations, and this is a very unique report with exact locations of Azerbaijanis, including their incursions inside the territory of Armenia. And the government must use this independent channel, because what I'm doing this on purpose. I'm not working, again, this is not non-political work. What I do, I show the unlawfulness of Azerbaijan activities, giving grounds to our government to discredit, to better discredit, let's say, and to use these facts internationally, let's say, to reach the removal from our villages. So what I say, they have to be, yes, removed from their village, from all these places, territories, because their physical presence itself resulted in massive violations, and I have to say gross violations of the rights of our civilians. This is right to water and sanitation, because they are now controlling certain water basins, water reservoirs, and because of this, certain villages do not have water at all, including drinking water. Apart from all of this, we have even to push this forward even before delimitation and demarcation, so-called official negotiation process, because any delimitation and demarcation, according to international experience, may take decades, may take 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. So would this mean that the rights of our compatriots would remain violated throughout all these 50 years? No, of course. That is why we have, first of all, to reach the removal. Even if the government has certain limitations, constraints in claiming these kind of things because of some, I don't know, geopolitical or some other issues. But they have to use this channel, the channel of objective information, to use them in their international negotiations, I don't know, etc., and so forth. And apart from all of this, when we use only mechanical approaches, such as maps of 50s or 60s, maps of 70 or, I don't know, 80s, then we get into what I'm saying always, we get into these geopolitical games, and we make ourselves victims of these geopolitical games. Because if we use human rights concept that I'm saying, it is very then easy to use human rights protection mechanisms such as United Nations, even reaching up to the Security Council, such as United Nations Human Rights Council, there's a Council of Europe, etc., and then to use the advantages of this protection of these mechanisms, of the rights, to strengthen the politico-military dimension, the politico-military direction, let's say, because human dimension is totally ignored, which is a huge problem. And that is why I'm saying that this is a gross violation of our constitution, of all international agreements, because our constitution says you cannot do anything in violation of the rights of any person. Human rights is number one. In all these places, we have many people who are deprived of their houses, private lands. We have cadastral documentation certifying, coming from Soviet Union, people received, they have in their hands their cadastral documentation, but they cannot use their homes, their houses, their lands, their pastures, because Azerbaijanis are either physically present there, or people, even if they're not physically present in these lands, our population, our people, they cannot even approach these lands because Azerbaijanis start shooting. And this is another threat, the double violation, even I have to say.
That's precisely why I kind of brought up this issue, because as someone who's covering this on a daily basis, one day someone's talking about maps that were delimited in 1929, and then we moved to 1960. There's always, it's like someone pulling something off the shelf of the library. You have, however, as you said, compiled reports not only on the atrocities that were committed during the war, on the issue of missing in action, on the issue of POWs, as well as since the breach of the border happened in May, you have advocated for establishment of a security zone in that area in order to protect the citizens. How is that being taken by the international community? Has there been any positive impact due to your reports from the international community's approach to this issue?
Well, I have to say why we came to this idea of having a security zone. The thing is that without delimitation and demarcation, it is right now hard to say what is the Armenian territory itself on the ground and what is the Azerbaijani territory. Because many people, even I talked to many people who come from Soviet Union and former officials, local officials, administrations, etc. There are different opinions. One thing is very clear from the historical part, etc. All these territories, of course, are Armenian lands historically. But from legal standpoint, if we go to the Soviet Union borders, which are, by the way, not a classical delimitation and demarcation, because Armenia and Azerbaijan were a part of one country. So classically, it is not possible, and it is, I would not recommend it calling classical delimitation and demarcation, because there has been no delimitation and demarcation between like two independent countries. These two countries were parts of one independent sovereign country. I think this is very important. So your question was, sorry,
I asked whether there has been any type of
international. Okay. So when we started advocating for this concept, there was really kind of some unrealistic feeling that whether it would be possible to create such a zone, let's say, but the international studying or all international studies were bringing us to that specific conclusion. And we started very hard to work towards this direction to prepare grounds for this. And I have to say that we were lucky, very lucky, because the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, there is a international body, Armenia is a part of this, it is called Council of Europe, and the parliament, so to say, of this organization, which is very powerful, is called Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, PACE. So the PACE, on 27 of September this year, passed a resolution, specific international resolution, and it took on board our recommendation, because we've worked a lot. I had lots of meetings with the special rapporteur of the Council of Europe. He arrived to Armenia. We presented all the facts to him, and we could keep it. Azerbaijani authorities, of course, were fighting very hard, I have to say, to strike out, so to say, this point, or this very important clause for that from that document, but they couldn't do that, and we could keep it. And I have to say that we were here in advocating all this very important clause alone, in a sense of basically we had no assistance from anyone. And I was personally in touch with the rapporteur, and he mentioned in the report, it is published document on the website of this international, very powerful organization, saying that the parties must start negotiations immediately towards creating a demilitarized zone for the rights of the people. And I have to say that I have many meetings with international ambassadors, with international organizations, etc. In there is an evolving kind of a developing concept among them that in reality security zone is needed to protect the population. I'm not even someone could say that you are too naive or too romantic, you know, in saying that tomorrow the zone will be created. But I have to say that when you analyze the situation on the ground, one immediately comes. So there is an idea comes to you that this is basically the only possibility to protect the rights of our people, of people who live in these bordering villages, who are facing every day from their window. They see every day Azerbaijani military soldiers or armed forces standing, let's say, up on the hill, observing them, which is a real threat to their security. So then, of course, the only idea is to find ways to push, to remove them from these villages so that people can live, people can start exercising their rights, which is unfortunately all these rights are remain still grossly violated.
I think one of the points that you made is extremely valid about the demarcation and delimitation issue of the Armenia-Azerbaijan border. But then while people are talking about this or within the context of coming to some kind of a settlement, a new issue has been brought up, which from my perspective is really dangerous, this 3+3 scheme, which essentially was something that Ankara and Baku have put forward. For our viewers, it's a scheme that has been put forth by Turkey and Azerbaijan that envisions including Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, as well as Russia, Turkey, and Iran as some kind of a regional base. How would that impact the rights of the people, in this case living in Armenia and Artsakh, because then it falls into that same kind of equation?
I have to say, Mr. Khachaturian, that this is a very political issue, and I have, from the perspective of my capacity, legal capacity, I cannot comment on this. But what I can do, what I can say, that we have to have in mind always that the source of all these violations is the continuous ongoing policy, genocidal policy of Azerbaijan, which is even deepening after the war. The evidence shows very clearly. We are now preparing a new report. There's a clear tendency that we have here even this policy has deepened, and this is a fascist policy. This is a fascist policy, and our Azerbaijani president is always blaming us, Armenians, in being fascists. This is their number one priority, always to call Armenians fascists. But I have to say that we have revealed a very interesting psychological phenomenon, that this is kind of the mirroring effect of trying to blame your counterpart, your enemy, or whoever, in all the let's say violations, all the bad things that you have yourself. And I have to say that now we are proving with evidence that this is a fascist policy. Moreover, we are now establishing a new direction of our research, trying to show to other countries what is the threat of this policy to them. Because at first glance, one can say from some country, well, this is some region, some small region in South Caucasus, some conflict between the two countries. So what is the problem then for us from this conflict? We do not have our personal interests apart from some geopolitical. The problem is that this policy keeps the atmosphere of animosity and enmity very hot between the two people who are worldwide spread. So Azerbaijanis and Armenians, including Turks, they live together in many countries, right? We have many countries where Azerbaijanis and Armenians live together. Russia, France, Germany, America, etc. So we have to bring to these countries that keeping the situation, or keeping their people, keeping the atmosphere very hot, in Armenophobia is a threat to their countries as well, because then they develop this animosity between two people worldwide, and they can cause tensions to these countries, which we could observe in Russia, for example, in France, etc. So this is, again, I'm coming, reiterating kind of myself and coming back to this very initial point, that we have to fight against the real motives, against the real source of all these violations. Mm-hmm. This is the genocidal policy, the fascist policy of the authorities of Azerbaijan, which is only deepening.
Dr. Tatoyan is in town at the invitation of the Armenian National Committee of America Western Region, and he will be traveling to various communities here in the Western United States. But on Sunday, November 21st, he will be the keynote speaker at the ANCA Grassroots luncheon. The ANCA Grassroots turns 10 this year, and it's great to have someone like Dr. Tatoyan keynoting, and he will be also awarded the ANCA Western Region's Human Rights Award at that luncheon. Please, if you're interested in attending that event, log on to ancawr.org and reserve your tickets. That luncheon is at 1 p.m. He will also be speaking at a student-oriented event on Monday, the 22nd, which will take place at 6 p.m. at the Northridge campus of the California State University at CSUN. In order to reserve your seats for that event, please again log on to ancawr.org, and please also remember that both events will be following the state and county and city guidelines for COVID, which means you will have to be required to present your vaccination proof and other proof that you're not infected. What is your message to the community? You've come a long way, and what is your message? What can we do sitting here in this complicated and tumultuous situation since the war?
Well, first of all, I want, of course, to express my thankfulness and appreciation to ANCA Western Region, and personally to Ms. Nora Ovsepian for their assistance and for inviting me, for organizing this very important mission. And I hope that this mission will give me the possibilities to present all the real facts to our compatriots, so that they have the real knowledge about the situation on the ground. And I think the help that could be provided by our communities here is to help to do everything to influence the governmental bodies here, to bring to their attention the real situation, because Azerbaijani authorities, they always distort the real situation. They falsify all the facts, and they create huge complications for us. And in this very complicated situation, as you mentioned, the role of diaspora is just indispensable, because it helps us bring through this channel the real information to the worldwide community. And of course, since in America we have not only influential governmental bodies, of course, but also international organizations located here. So it is a very good chance, and I consider it an exclusive chance for me to use this opportunity, the momentum, to have, through meetings with our compatriots, with our diaspora organizations, to bring the real situation, so that our compatriots could help us in revealing or in presenting the truth to the governmental influential bodies of this country.
And just to add perspective, we've seen you in action essentially every day since last September of 27th, when the war erupted. What was your daily life like before the war? So we know that your office is doing more than addressing POW issues.
Yes, of course. We have such a very, very, very wide mandate, and we are acting under our constitution. The war only added all these commitments to what we were doing. Of course, we continue doing all the work that we were doing before the war. These are human rights starting from child rights institution, ending up with prisons and rights of mentally health people, people with mental health issues, etc. And we continue doing this as well. But the war issues, documenting all the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, became #1 priority for us. The complication is that we have never had this kind of experience before, of course. This was the most the complicated and the complicated task, let's say, with enormous, I would say, complications, problems. And the problem is that there has been no international experience in other countries as well that could be easily adjusted to our realities. That is why it created more complications. But anyway, you know, the problems are so vital, and the need for the protection of our compatriots' rights are so actual that we have no possibilities but only going forward and through strengthening our capacities.
And we've also reported on the issue of prisoners of war and other captives currently being held in Azerbaijan. Where does that situation stand, and what do you sense about their conditions who are being held by Azeris?
I have several reports certifying brutal torture. Our compatriots were tortured and they are under threat for their lives in the closed institutions, in prisons of Azerbaijan. And these torture, brutalities, ill treatment clearly show that all these actions are motivated. They have ethnical grounds and religious grounds, because we have violations related to both of these grounds. Azerbaijani authorities, they continue keeping our compatriots, military servicemen and civilians illegally. They have no grounds for doing this, because according to international humanitarian law, specifically the 1949 Geneva Convention of the Third Geneva Convention, every country, after cessation of hostilities, they have to immediately release and repatriate all prisoners of war or captives generally. But Azerbaijani authorities decided to keep them in order to use them for their political and military benefits. So they keep them for bargaining purposes, and they launch very artificially, illegally, criminal investigations, judicial trials, showing to the world as if we have caught criminals and we are administering justice. But the process has nothing to do with justice, and we had even publications according to which Azerbaijanis even tried to acquire control over certain territories to use this issue in putting illegal pressure during negotiations, and which is itself a war crime. It is forbidden, absolutely forbidden, under the international humanitarian law. And the authorities of the behavior of the authorities is very cynical, and this is total ignorance of ignoring the whole international community. Despite all the statements, they do continue, let's say, undertaking this policy of even, I would say, revenge and retaliation.
Thank you, Dr. Tatoyan. Your work, especially since the war and its aftermath, has added a very important human dimension to the story. It's one thing to cover agreements and negotiations and those machinations, but it's another to, on a daily basis, get how this is impacting not the person necessarily living in Yerevan, but specifically the people who live in Goris, Rapan, Shurnukh, and that area, and Yeras, of course, which has been shot. And hopefully this interview will propel all of you to attend some of these events where Dr. Tatoyan will be speaking, to get a first-hand knowledge of what's actually going on since the war and what has caused our nation so much grief because of the war. Dr. Tatoyan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And we're looking forward to attending all of these events and getting to know you more and your mission more. Thank you.
Thank you for this interview, and thank you to all your viewers, to our compatriots for watching us. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us tonight. Have a good evening.